Mr. Chairman. Minority deposit institutions, MDIs, like all financial institutions, have struggled under the weight of the regulatory burden of Dodd-Frank. According to a Harvard University study, Dodd-Frank has created an uneven regulatory playing field. This playing field resulted in additional legal and compliance costs for small institutions, preventing them from serving their customers, particularly the businesses and consumers within their community. MDIs play a unique role in serving their community. According to the FDIC and the Fed, MDIs serve consumers in low to moderate income communities at higher rates than non-MDIs. This committee should be focused on alleviating the burden on these institutions so they can serve their community, specifically minority and LMI communities. One such burden that will have a devastating effect on small depository institutions, and particularly minority depository institutions, is the proposed CECL accounting standard. Now, as many on this panel know, I could spend the length of this hearing discussing the pitfalls of this ill-conceived proposal. Instead, I'll simply read an excerpt from a letter to this committee regarding CECL from the National Bankers Association, which identifies itself as the voice of minority banking in the United States. And I quote, "To the extent that CECL increases the cost of lending to borrowers that are perceived by regulators as being riskier or of lower credit quality, such as low and moderate income consumers and small businesses located in low and moderate income communities, the economics of our lending decisions could be altered dramatically. This would further restrict access to credit for consumers and businesses that already experience limited credit options," end quote. In addition, I would like to read a statement from the Center for Responsible Lending, President Mike Calhoun, on CECL, in which he said, and I quote, "As proposed, CECL creates a significant disincentive for lenders to originate loans to low and moderate income families and communities of color," end quote. I would like to ask unanimous consent that the full statements from both of these organizations be entered into the record.
Without objection.
Statements I just read are not unique. The truth is numerous consumer and industry groups have voiced concerns over CECL. Despite the warning signs these groups have raised, this committee has not taken any formal action to better understand the effects of CECL and what it will have on low to moderate income consumers and minorities. No full committee hearings, no subcommittees, no markups, no nothing. This inaction flies in face of LMI borrowers and minority communities across the country who will be adversely affected by this accounting standard. For all of the rhetoric from the other side of the aisle about how consumers and minorities can struggle in the financial services industry, the Democratic leadership on this committee remains woefully silent on the issue that has direct impact on minority depository institutions and the consumers they serve. I specifically mentioned that the Democratic leadership of this committee has been active because CECL is a bipartisan issue that has support from members on both sides of the aisle. 52 bipartisan members have signed on to a bill to delay implementation of CECL until a study is completed that examines access to credit for consumers. In addition, roughly 30 members of this committee just last week signed a bipartisan letter I sent to FSOC urging the Office of Financial Research to study the impacts of CECL. Despite this bipartisan support, the chairwoman of this committee has done nothing to address an issue that could devastate low and moderate income lending and lending to minority communities. In front of this committee today are witnesses representing 3 separate organizations that have voiced concerns over the effects of CECL that they could have on their members institutions as well as the consumers they serve. And yet, this committee has shown no interest in bringing this issue up, and in fact seems completely content to let CECL go into place despite the warning signs related to minority and low-income borrowers. This committee is tasked with ensuring a healthy financial services industry and promoting economic freedom for everyday Americans. That responsibility includes ensuring financial institutions are not driven out of the marketplace by onerous requirements and protecting the ability of consumers to gain access to credit. With that said, I urge all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to call for a committee hearing on CECL, and better yet, have FASB come before this committee and defend this standard. I yield back.
Now you.